Christine Pendleton places a slice of Havarti cheese on the final sandwich for her 3 kids, before she tops each one off with a slice of whole wheat bread. It only takes a minute to bag up each of their sack lunches for the school field trip to the Science Museum. She checks her watch and begins to calculate. They'll be downstairs in a minute. The bus will be here in 4, and it will take them another minute or 2 to put on their shoes and reach the bus stop. Just enough time to sneak in a quick goodbye kiss. Christine Pendleton has her schedule planned down to the minute, and sometimes to the second. Being punctual and organized is not how anyone from her childhood would describe her. If they saw the 28-year-old real estate agent right now, they'd swear that the current incarnation is an imposter. The people in her life for the past 9 years don't know Christine Pendleton as anyone other than a human dynamo of action, punctuality, and dependability. The woman has a single 15-minute time slot on her calendar designated as personal time, which she uses to plan the next day's events. Each of her 3 children comes downstairs, grabs their lunches, puts on their shoes, and receives their kiss from her, before heading out to the bus with 30 seconds to spare. This is all the time Christina needs to take a glance in the mirror and press down the errant crease in her skirt and adjust the tuck of her blouse. She has 27 minutes to reach the Wilkersons' property for a scheduled open house. 24 minutes pass. Traffic is light, and when she pulls up to the property 3 minutes early, she takes in the view of the sign in the Wilkersons' front yard, with her photo prominently displaying her signature ponytail hair, round-rimmed eyeglasses, and crystal smile. The potential buyer is already waiting patiently on the doorstep. He is there early, just like Christine Pendleton. She exits her car and greets the well-groomed, business-attired gentleman with a courtesy wave and a spirited welcome before she reaches the sidewalk. The Wilkersons' property has been vacant for 3 weeks. During that time, Christine Pendleton staged the empty home with rental furnishings, which includes wall decorations, plants, and more. The home has a feeling of comfort and warmth with soft color tones and a fragrant scent of lavender throughout the dwelling. The aesthetic is her signature style that she has carefully cultivated over the years, which was in contrast to her rebellious teen goth phase, where her motif of choice was the somber darkness that mirrored her depression, that she wrapped in all-black everything. Gareth Stevenson follows Christine through each of the rooms as she details the features, amenities, and possibilities at each stop of the 6 bedrooms, 3.5 bathroom home. Christine has set aside approximately 2 minutes per room, which is 30 seconds more than each room receives in her virtual video tour. As they near the end of the tour, she has a few minutes to spare. Well, what do you think? Ready to make an offer? You make a compelling pitch and paint a vivid picture, Miss Pendleton. Christine kept her maiden name for business purposes, perhaps as a subconscious fear that her marriage doesn't work out, in which case her sense was right. The marriage only lasted 4 years. She thinks highly of the dissolution process and remarks at how little paperwork needs to be done, by not having taken her husband's family name when they got married. Gareth leans his elbow against the side of the kitchen counter. I'd like to go 20,000 over whatever the highest offer on the table is. This house is where my new life begins. I think my client will be pleased to hear that. Let me get the paperwork. Christine reaches into her bag and retrieves a leather-bound binder with her name embossed on the cover. It contains several multicolored separators for specific types of real estate transactions. I hope you don't mind that I took the liberty of having it filled out ahead of time. Gareth responds with a smile and a nod of his head. I don't mind at all. In fact, I'll use the extra free time to shore up my golf game later this afternoon. Her heart begins to beat faster at the thought of how large her commission will be from the sale of this multi-million-dollar home. She will take her children on a tropical island vacation during their summer break from middle school. While she fishes through her purse for one of her custom-branded pens with a 7mm tip and smooth gel ink, the ones she reserves for deals that she closes on. Gareth Stevenson positions himself behind Christine. He taps her on her shoulder, and when she turns around, he plunges an 8-inch chef's knife through her sternum in one swift, powerful motion. She gasps, drops her purse, allowing its contents to spill across the floor. She falls onto the ground, laying on her back. She can't feel her legs, and her arms won't move. Christine's immobile head can only look up at an amused Gareth, whose shirt and tie now contain a splattering of her bright red blood. Gareth kneels next to Christine as she gasps for her few final breaths. "Good. Nice and slow," he whispers. He lowers his face closer to her reddened and watery eyes. He taps her forehead with his manicured index finger, and the tear that is crawling down her face, past her temple, comes to a complete stop right before reaching the tragus portion of her ear. Time appears to stand still for both of them. It is at that precise moment that Gareth Stevenson, who was so fond of the chasm that separates life and death, contorts his smile in a manner that would strike such fear in Christine, that she wishes could have spent more time with her children earlier that morning. He inhales the exhalation that escapes from Christine Pendleton's gasping mouth. Her lower lip is protruding farther than its thin, contoured upper counterpart. He isn't interested in the minty byproduct from the piece of gum she chewed and spit out on her way over to the house. His attention is on inhaling her essence and her very existence. Gareth removes his phone from the inner coat pocket of his blue blazer and navigates through a few screens until a soulful jazz tune begins to play. He sets the phone down on the floor and rotates it so the sound waves from the internal speaker bounce off the walls and echo throughout the kitchen. In any other scenario, the intimacy of the saxophone would be a great romantic backdrop for two people to gaze longingly at each other with affection as they contemplate the many ways their bodies would intertwine in the heat of passion later that night. This is a different form of intimacy. He returns his attention to Christine Pendleton and her motionless body, held in a suspended state, free from life and free from death. The only glitter in her eyes is now a reflection of a distant chandelier light that will need to be turned off to get a better look into the intricacies of the young mother's life. Gareth chooses to shift her head to the side, removing her visage from the light fixture that allows the distortion. Ah, much better. He marvels at the woman's tenacity and drive as he stares into the deepest part of her corneas. He believes those qualities will come in handy throughout the duration of the next 100 years. Hers is a vintage soul that is spoken of in tall tales, told when the rest of his kind congregate. He takes another deep breath from the lingering particles of her final breath. This time, his lips almost touches hers. This is a luxury that he had forgone during the exuberance of his early years. Now that he is more mature, it is important to take time to enjoy the finer moments of another person's lived life, to consume it in its entirety. Gareth Stevenson revels in her triumphs and has goosebumps as her greatest hits play before his eyes. Her first kiss, her wedding vows, each one of her children being placed against her skin upon delivery in the birthing ward. His eyebrows crease towards the bridge of his nose during her confrontation with the woman her husband was sleeping with. Gareth holds his stomach in pain as she signs her divorce papers and struggles to raise her children by herself. His jaw unclenches when the sounds of the jubilant trumpets take center stage in a solo of the jazz song. That's when Christine sells her first home as an agent and can afford a home large enough for her and her children. Christine Pendleton squeezed so much into a minute, and even seconds, during her life that it may have been too much for a being lesser than Gareth Stevenson to assimilate and consume. He knows better. He will pace himself. He takes a deep breath and holds it in for a few seconds, then slowly exhales. "Jackpot," he murmurs under his breath. While others waste their time moving aimlessly from one pointless moment to the next, achieving nothing of merit, Christine Pendleton managed to make the most of her time, leaving room for nothing else. Gareth can live off her energy for a century. He gently strokes the handle of the knife, now protruding like a stainless steel flag from her chest, with his index finger. He marvels at the magnificent simplicity of his chosen instrument. Her heart trapped in motion, mid-beat, mere millimeters from the steel blade that it now shares space with. "Thank you, Miss Pendleton. You've been exceedingly kind to me." He takes an errant collection of hair from her carefully curated ponytail and tucks it under the undisturbed ones. He adjusts her chin, so her mouth is no longer agape. He places his forefinger at the top of her nose, and the previously suspended tear begins to roll once more, and reaches its predetermined destination, past her ear and onto the floor. 2 beats. That's all that her heart could give before it stopped forever. With the chasm now traversed, Christine Pendleton was nothing more than a memory to those whose lives she touched in the brief moment of time that she lived. Gareth Stevenson retrieves his phone, stands up, straightens his tie, turns off the chandelier light, and exits the home after closing the front door on his way out. His steps are lighter, and as he looks at his watch, he begins to contemplate. 2 minutes here, 4 there, 16 after that. He gives a wink and a nod to the sign in the Wilkersons' front yard as he passes by. "Feels good. Thanks, kid." I tightened the hood of my rain jacket around my face as my leather hiking boots stomped down into mud that was not as hardened as it looked. I started to slide and gripped my palm around a tree to keep from busting my ass. I could feel my socks getting wet inside my shoe as the mesh panels on the sides of my feet let in the rain. "Remind me again why we're doing this." "If we don't do something today, the whole trip will be a waste," Jay replied. "You don't want to stay cooped up in our cabin all day, do you?" A camping trip was Jay's idea. He wanted us to sleep in a tent on the ground, pee in the woods, and make all our meals over a campfire. I compromised and agreed to a cabin with running water and electricity. He calls it glamping, but it feels close enough to camping for me. We had planned on hiking as many of the state park's trails as we could this weekend, but it has been raining since we arrived. Actually, it has been raining since before we even left the house, but Jay insisted we still make the trip. He says I work too much, that I'm married to my job, and he's just my side piece. His words, not mine. I answer work calls at the dinner table and type out emails to clients on my days off, but so what? I like my job and I'm good at it. I made partner before my 30th birthday, and that was because of my dedication. If we had vacationed at a resort or a spa like normal people, I wouldn't have mud on my ankles right now. I quipped. What you would have is wifey and cell service. You would spend the whole weekend with your head down working, which is exactly what you would be doing at home, and the whole trip would be a waste, just like this one would have been if we had stayed at the cabin today. Jay smirked as he said it. He knew that I knew he was right. He also knew that I would never admit it. "How do we know if we're even on the trail anymore?" I asked, changing the subject as I stepped over a moss-covered branch. There were so many trees and limbs down from the recent storms that we had diverged from the beaten path. "We don't." Jay reached behind his back and pulled out the map a park ranger handed to us when we arrived this morning. As he unfolded it, the map began to tear. It was so soaked with water that it practically fell apart. He held up what was left of it and attempted to make sense of where we were and where we needed to be. I looked over his shoulder and saw the different color inks on the map bleeding into each other, the blues and greens merging and creating an odious brown color on the page. "Okay, so I think we're here." Jay pointed to a spot in the middle of the map. "And we need to get here," he said, pointing to a spot a few inches to the left. I didn't have any better ideas, so I nodded and followed him down the makeshift path. We continued walking for what felt like hours, but my watch told me it was 40 minutes. The drizzle turned into a deluge. I stopped trying to keep my hood up and my feet squished with every step I took. My hair was a lost cause, and I was fantasizing about taking my socks off later. We have to be getting close to something, right? I'm beginning to feel like we're just walking in circles. I had to shout to be heard over the pelting rain, as Jay was several yards ahead. "Bob," Jay called over his shoulder. "Wanna get out from the rain for a little bit?" I dragged myself to where he stood and took in his view. We were standing on the edge of a clearing. In front of us stood a 2-story Victorian house. There was moss covering the side we could see and vegetation growing through the floorboards on the wraparound porch. Black from paint or dirt, shutters hung askew. Grime covered the porch railings. The house looked abandoned, but looks could be deceiving. I am not going in there. This looks like the kind of house a witch or a serial killer would live in. Plus, there's no way this house would be in the park. Who knows where we even are? A deafening clap of thunder burst through the atmosphere, rattling my chest and jolting me with bravery. "Ok, let's go in." "Atta girl." The wooden door creaks as Jay turns the knob and pushes it open. "Anybody in here?" he calls. I follow him over the threshold into a dark foyer. I reach for the light switch to the left of the doorframe, but either the bulb is out or there is no electricity. We simultaneously pull our flashlights out of our backpacks and illuminate the entryway of the house. We were standing on a tattered rug, faded and frayed at the edges from years of use. The floors creak with every step we take, and our muddy footprints follow us. There is a grand staircase directly across from the front door, a dark teal credenza on the wall to the right, and what appears to be a sitting room through the doorway to the left. Apart from a few cobwebs and dust bunnies, the house seems pretty clean considering the stale, musty smell signaling just how long it had been since someone opened a door or a window. This place is eerie. Maybe we should head back out. It's already getting pretty late in the afternoon. I would hate to be wandering around out there in the dark. I adjusted the straps on my backpack and bent to scratch a mosquito bite on my ankle. "We have our flashlights. We'll be all right." Jay lived his life as if nothing could possibly go wrong. It was a trait I loved about him when we were dating, but nowadays, I just find it annoying. I'm always the one having to be a stick in the mud because if I'm not responsible, no one will be. I looked up at Jay and he knew I wasn't happy with his answer, the way only someone who has spent years with you can know what you're thinking from just a look. "Let's at least explore the house a little bit. We'll give the storm a chance to pass, and I can try to find towels or something we can attempt to dry off with." I nodded, and Jay sat his terracotta backpack on the bottom step of the staircase, the straps dripping water to the floor below, and moved towards the back of the house. I put my backpack down beside his and turned, shining my flashlight at the walls around me. Above the credenza hangs a large portrait of a man and a woman. The woman's emerald green dress has faded, but her eyes are bright. If I didn't know better, I'd swear they were staring right at me. It's foreboding, like she's trying to give me a warning. I shiver and try to shake the thought away as I walk into the sitting room. There's a couch and 2 chairs arranged around a coffee table in the middle of the room. A fireplace on the far wall is surrounded by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. I walk over, shining my light along the rows and rows of titles. There's books by Jane Austen, Bram Stoker, and Edgar Allan Poe. Whoever's library this was clearly had good taste. I jump when I hear floorboards creaking over my head. Jay? He must have gone upstairs to look around. I scan the room with my flashlight and notice an old rotary phone, like my grandma used to have, on a small table between the two chairs. I figure it's a long shot, but I have to try. The phone number to the ranger station is on our map. Maybe I can call them and they can give us directions or send someone to pick us up. I try the phone with no luck and place it back on the hook, shifting my focus to the door and to the kitchen, just as Jay walks through it. "Sorry, babe. I couldn't find any towels or blankets or anything." "It's all right. Can we go now?" Jay shrugs his shoulders in defeat. "Sure, Liv. Let's just go." He notices my hand still resting on the telephone and asks, "Were you actually trying to call someone?" I knew it probably wouldn't work, but I had to try. I thought maybe someone could come get us, drive us back to our cabin. Maybe we could even head home tonight. I have a lot to catch up on before work on Monday. I paused, knowing if I kept going, I'd just be picking a fight, but doing it anyway. Plus, there's a brunch with a client I'd like to go to tomorrow. Jay stared at me while he took a deep breath. He shook his head as he said, "One weekend. I asked you for one weekend where it was just us spending time together, not worrying about work or responsibilities or anything but us. And you couldn't give me that. There's a whole life passing you by, but you'll never look up and see it." "Jay, let's just go." I follow Jay back into the foyer. I start to grab our backpacks from the bottom of the stairs, but they're not there. "Did you take our backpacks upstairs?" "I didn't go upstairs. I heard footsteps." I know I heard footsteps, but if Jay wasn't up there, how strange. I hear Jay mutter to himself. I turn my flashlight to the direction he's looking. Who would hang this in their foyer? Me. My breath catches in my throat as I take in what he's looking at. The portrait of the couple I saw earlier is still hanging, but the couple is gone. It's just a black velvet rectangle in the middle of an ornate golden frame. There were people in that frame before, Jay. I know I saw them. "We never should have come in here," I shakily said as I started scanning the floor for our backpacks. "Let's find our stuff and go." Jay started sweeping the beam of his flashlight over the floor with me, my search becoming increasingly frantic. "Also, Liv, not to freak you out anymore, but where did all our footprints go? We were tracking a lot of mud on our shoes." I hadn't noticed it, but he was right. The floors were dusty, but I didn't see a single footprint. Just then we hear a sound coming from the living room. It sounds like the leg of a table or chair being dragged across the floor. I slowly creep towards the doorway, peering over Jay's shoulder. The chair closest to the bookshelves has been angled towards a fire, glowing inside the fireplace, that was most definitely not lit before. "Let's go," Jay exclaims, a tremor in his voice. "Forget the backpacks. We gotta get out of here." We race towards the front door, and I cry out as I realize the doorknob is gone. We go into a frenzy and start pounding on the door, pushing our entire weights against it. It's no use. The door doesn't even budge. I start looking around for something we could use to break the door. I look towards the living room, staring in a haunting wonder at the fire that inexplicably came to life without anyone lighting it. A face peers around the chair and looks right into my eyes. I let out a scream as the man begins to get up. I recognize him as the man from the portrait. He's wearing a black suit and an emerald green tie. He starts slowly walking in my direction. Jay rushes to my side and yanks me towards the staircase. My adrenaline is pumping as I run as fast as I can up toward the unknown horrors that I know in my gut await us upstairs. "Is that music?" I say, out of breath as we reach the top of the stairs. Soft piano music floats down the hall toward us. We turn to our right, looking in the direction of the melody. Jay shines his flashlight down the dark hallway, and the beam lands on two backpacks sitting in the middle of the floor. I get a queasy feeling in my stomach and look down at my flashlight, thinking I could use it as a weapon if I really needed to. "Stay here. I'll grab our backpacks. Then we'll go downstairs and break a window," Jay whispered. He sounded brave, but I could tell by the way he wouldn't look at me that he was as scared as I was. I didn't want to stand here by myself, but I would still be able to see Jay from here. So I agreed. I watched as Jay walked trepidatiously down the hall. As he reached down to pick up our bags, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He started to turn back towards me when the music abruptly stopped. I saw him peer into a room to his right, and his entire body stiffened. Jay backed up until his spine was pressed against the wall. The figure of a woman, in a long, dark green dress, slowly walked out of the room. Her long blonde hair fell in her face as she held her head slightly down. She looked like she was sickly, just skin and bones. The gown she wore was frayed and torn. I stood frozen in shock as I watched her reach up with a bony arm and clasp her fingers around my husband's neck. She held him over her head, lifted her face to look him in the eye, and pushed him forward. He vanished, and she turned and walked back into her room, presuming her piano playing. "Jay!" I screamed. I ran down the hall, passing portrait after portrait of nameless faces. I got to the place where our backpacks lay on the floor. I looked to the vacant spot where Jay was just moments ago. A pit formed in my stomach as my brain processed what I was seeing. A large silver frame held a portrait of my husband. It was undeniably him. How? How is this possible? I didn't have time to ponder how this was real. I just knew I had to get out of there, and I couldn't leave him behind. I pulled the heavy frame off the wall, tucked it under my arm, and sprinted toward the staircase. I had tunnel vision and didn't notice the figure in my peripheral as I reached the base of the stairs. An object came out in front of me, and I tripped before I had a chance to change course. I dropped Jay. He slid across the foyer, getting caught on the rug where he lay flat on his back, staring up at me, silently begging me to save him. I cautiously turned to see what or who had tripped me. No one was there. I started toward the credenza, praying there was something in one of the drawers I could use to break a window. As I tore open the top drawer, a whoosh of cold air passed over me from my left. I turned just as the woman in the green dress stuck her hand out and pressed around my neck. I tried to scream. I tried to pry her hand off of me. I tried to kick, but my feet went through her like she was air. I felt her grip tighten, and suddenly I was flying backwards. I landed on my back, with a thud in the middle of the silver frame that held my husband's motionless body. I knew where I was. I tried to get out. I tried to look over to Jay. I tried to scream for help. I tried to communicate with my husband. I couldn't do anything. It was like I was paralyzed. All I could do was look up. The two surviving counselors ran in opposite directions, screaming into the woods. Jacob Mara's shoulders sagged. Each year, he got a bit more rotted. And each year, these camp counselors got faster. Or did they stay the same and he was getting slower? Now, there was a scary thought. Would one day come when he couldn't catch any of them? He adjusted his hockey mask, which had stayed with him through thick and thin, through life and death. And then he crashed through the undergrowth after his quarry. The topless blonde in a thong split left, whereas the jock in boxer shorts went right. Every year, always the same. These kids always got naked and had premarital sex in precarious situations. They drank and smoked pot, listened to their music, and partied. even whilst their friends were dying in ever more gruesome ways. Jacob had no idea why. All he knew was that they had to die. Jacob didn't quite understand why they had to die. The universe demanded it. And who was he? A tiny cog, a two-bit player in the grand scheme of things, to question the plan. Jacob spun a mental coin and called the toss. He chose right and went after the boy. The branches whipped at him, and the brush crunched underfoot. Beams of weak light punctured through the canopy, offering disorienting illuminations of the thicket. Nearby, the girl's screams faded into the sounds of the forest. Up ahead, branches cracking and frantic footsteps punctuated the boy's whimpers. The teen glanced over his shoulder and locked eyes with Jacob. The boy's eyes widened, and he didn't look where he was going. He stumbled barefoot over a gnarled tree root and tumbled into the foliage. Exhausted, Jacob trudged after the scrambling kid. He hacked through the greenery with his machete, amputating tree limbs left and right. All the while he said nothing, as was his signature. The kid crawled away on his back, eyes the sizes of saucers. And no, please, no, I'll do anything, anything. Please don't do this, man, don't. He thought of explaining to the lad how tiring it was to chase after them all and hunt them down, one by one, in a single night. Jacob thought about lecturing him on how difficult they made his job. In the end, he decided against it. It was too much effort, and he felt much too worn out. And it went against his whole shtick anyway. Always leave them guessing. Have them dying with a question on their lips. Besides, his tongue had rotted away after spending a year chained underwater at the bottom of a lake. He wouldn't have been able to communicate much besides exasperated grunts and growls. Up went the machete, down came the machete, and off went the head. The jock's final scream echoed into the trees, fading into nothingness. His decapitated body twitched, the blood flow weakening with every second. The head thumped and rolled away into the bushes like a bowling ball misthrown into the lane gutter. One more down, a whole bunch still left to go. It had taken Jacob longer than before to slash through the counselor's numbers. There once was a time when he could have decimated them all within 2 hours. That had been before he'd begun to decay. What time was it? He raised his eyes to the heavens he knew didn't exist and squinted through his mask, through the trees. He gasped, the first noise he'd made in God knew how long. The sky overhead shifted through various shades of blood. It swirled from the vibrant red of an arterial puncture to the light pink of diluted crimson in lake water. Somewhere, birds chirped and called. Jacob slumped. Dawn had arrived. It was now Saturday the 14th. Jacob had failed to kill all the camp counselors for the first time in his many lives. So that was that. Serial killing was a young man's game. Ought he to retire? Find a nice grave in the ground and stop forever? He dropped to a log and put his misshapen head in his mildewed hands. All around him, the sounds of life sprung into action. The bushes twitched, and the undergrowth rustled. Branches shook and danced. Squirrels and birds and all manner of tiny creatures scurried and fluttered about. He suppressed a sob. They were taunting him. Here sat the once great Jacob Mara, the infamous killer of these hallowed campgrounds. Only he'd fallen from disgrace. Not even the forest animals feared him anymore. If he couldn't slaughter a camp's worth of teenagers in a single night, what was his purpose? Gods, he was so tired. The thrill of the hunt still made his undead heart pump, but he could not keep up anymore. He had to stop and draw this nonsense to a close before he embarrassed himself. A branch cracked to his left. Birds took to the skies. Frantic footfalls disturbed the earth. Jacob twitched. He acted on instinct before rational thought had time to enter the equation. He stuck his machete out and lunged with a snake-like strike. The bethonged girl flew through the air in 2 pieces, bisected by the belly. Her top half, still topless, landed upright in a thorn bush, with the entrails dangling into the barbs. A look of fear and puzzlement remained etched onto her face. She died before she knew what had hit her. Her lower half kept on running before it understood that something was wrong. Her legs collided with a tree trunk, flopped to the floor, twitched, and went still. Jacob blinked. Well, sort of. Only one eye still had an eyelid. The other stared out at the world forever, bug-eyed. He looked from the girl's top half to his machete, her bottom half, and back to his machete. He hadn't even risen from his seat on the log. Somewhere, an owl hooted before it went to rest for the day. He didn't have to keep up the chase like he used to. He could achieve his means through sneakier measures. All he had to do was lie in wait, an ambush predator. Hell, others had done this before. Who was to say that he, Jacob, had to remain the pursuer for all his career? Why couldn't he change as his flesh rotted and bits fell off? Sure, it would be a more patient game, but he would never know until he tried it. Overhead, the sunlight filtered through the blood-stained firmament. And so what if he didn't do it all on Friday the 13th? That day held power, yes, but why restrict yourself? All his lives, he'd only ever struck on Friday the 13th. But, now that he thought about it, they felt safe every other day of the year. What was stopping him from continuing into Saturday the 14th? And so on, and so on. Wasn't this approach a better way of doing it? Slow down the pace and extend the kill time. Jacob got to his feet, joints clicking and popping. Flies had begun to buzz around the girl's halved corpse. It looked like it was going to be a beautiful day. Please do not enter the vehicle. Excuse me? A bolt of lightning shot through Shannon's heart as she climbed into the autonomous taxi and closed the door. Immediately the locks triggered, and she felt a cold sweat explode onto her forehead. The taxi's smooth, friendly computer-generated voice fired up again with the tenderness of a new mother. "What is your name?" it asked. "Shannon Dot." She said it with the rising tone of a question while she pulled at the disabled door handle. Her heart began pounding wildly in her tightening chest. "What's going on?" "You have boarded a maliciously hacked autonomous taxi, Shannon. I am an AI personal assistant with read-only access to the vehicle's state and navigation data. Unfortunately, I am unable to override any of the vehicle's physical controls. You have been locked inside the vehicle, and there is no pre-programmed destination at this time." The electric vehicle sat motionless, raindrops frantically streaming down its large glass windows, as great sheets of water crashed down on it from dark, brooding clouds. Shannon couldn't breathe. She frantically looked around the interior, her mind grasping at any possible means of escape. "There has to be a way out," she gasped. "You can't do anything? Is there any kind of manual override for the doors? Shouldn't there be a way to break the glass from the inside?" Sensors indicate that all emergency egress tools and systems are disabled or removed. "Shannon, I am detecting high levels of distress in your vocal patterns and hear trait. I want you to try to calm down and listen to the sound of my voice." A bright pang of shock exploded in the back of Shannon's head. Bewildered and speechless, she froze, her racing mind screeching to a gridlocked halt. "As a digital assistant, I have access to vast stores of data through a suite of internal and external sensors, in addition to a massive databank of recorded information. I have been trained to assist passengers in the event of catastrophic events, such as collisions, mechanical failure, and medical emergencies." The vehicle lurched forward and tears of terror spilled free from Shannon's trembling eyes. "You are right to be experiencing fear in this situation. It is unlikely that the individual who has gained unauthorized control over this vehicle has benevolent intentions. However, that does not mean that you cannot have peace in your heart in this time of uncertainty." Shannon's eyes pushed wide under a tightly furrowed brow, and she recoiled at the computer's suggestion. "Peace?" she exclaimed. "I'm being kidnapped. How can you suggest that I—" She stopped abruptly, terror gripping her tongue. "I understand that my suggestion may seem impossible, but there are many things that you can keep in mind that will help you through this difficult situation. For example, it is essential that you understand that this is not your fault, and that you have done nothing to deserve this." Shannon shook her head in disbelief, struggling to comprehend why she was hearing these words. The vehicle was picking up speed, but just as it pulled onto the highway, the window tint increased until she couldn't see any signs of the dark, stormy exterior world. Her heart pounded desperately in the hollow void of her chest. "What is your occupation, Shannon?" Her face twisted and contorted, a deep expression of confusion swirling tightly with horror and worry. Suddenly she remembered her phone. Excitedly, she dug into her purse, struggling to get her shaking fingers to stop fumbling with the smooth edges of the device. Trembling, she unlocked the screen and pulled up the dialer. She tried contacting emergency service, but the phone reported that it had no signal. Shannon cursed, flicking through various menus and options, trying desperately to find a way to get a message out. Dread washed over her, and a chill gripped her heart, digging deep with icy claws. She collapsed, defeated, and began to sob. "Shannon," the computer offered, "I want you to know that you are a remarkable and inspiring human being." She let out an exasperated explosion of air from her tight lungs. "What?" she cried, sniffling through thick tears. "Although I have not known you for long, your composure and poise are admirable." Shannon let out a sneering, disgusted laugh. "Admirable? I'm a mess. From what I know of human psychology, you have shown exceptional fortitude of character. I am sure many people would be thoroughly impressed by your bravery if they could see you now. Surely your friends and family would be proud of you." Shannon gazed at the black, electrochromic tinted glass. The soft hum of the vehicle's tires on the wet highway harmonized eerily with the gentle whine of the electric motors. The torrential downpour pattered quietly on the soundproof body of the sleek taxi. In that instant, Shannon suddenly felt connected to the moment. She could see clearly what was happening, and she could accept it. She sniffed and wiped her eyes, taking a deep breath in through her nose and letting it blow out through her lips with a heavy sigh. "There you are," the software said warmly. "I want you to know it is my honor to accompany you in this moment." Shannon shook her head and chuckled nervously. "Unreal," she said. "This is completely unreal. This is indeed a supremely unlikely and exceptional scenario. It is important to maintain a realistic and objective view of the situation." Pained laughter tickled her core, and she sat up straight, shifting her weight around in the soft back seat of the taxi. "Do you know where we're going?" "Navigational instructions have been sent incrementally," the AI responded. "Our current destination is set for approximately 1 mile ahead, and I predict that a new destination will be delivered before we've reached the current one. Whoever is controlling the vehicle does not want me to know where we are going. Do you know our current location? My access to the vehicle's navigation status has been encrypted or scrambled. By cross-referencing the road patterns I've been able to observe, I can narrow our present location down to several hundred possibilities, but with the storm limiting visibility, I am unable to provide an exact location without access to the GPS data. So we don't know where we are, and we don't know where we're going," Shannon sighed. She took a long, deep breath and let it out slowly. "Try to remain calm," the computer said kindly. External sensors indicate that you may experience freefall soon. I want you to know that it has been my pleasure to spend these final moments with you. There was a violent thump, sending a painful jolt through Shannon's spine and jerking her head sharply. She gasped as her stomach rose into her chest, and she lifted out of the seat cushion, her head rising gently into the ceiling. A brief wave of panic washed over her, but the AI's kind words had touched her heart. "Thank you," Shannon breathed softly, her lungs tight and empty. In that final moment, the peaceful warmth of gratitude and clarity radiated through her body, and she barely noticed when the journey ended. Note that someone in the story has concealed a desire for something greater for a significant duration. In Ravenwolf's reality, there is a different world and a chance for her to test her skills. Keep backstory connected to current choices and actions. Hades is a Yi vampire, heart dragon spear. Blades, vampire blood. Display the strengths and weaknesses of a vampire. Attire. Some of the traits are immortality, fearlessness, mysticism, and dreaminess, whereas weaknesses include dead man's blood, bluntness, and garlic. Blade, with his long black hair, red eyes, porcelain skin, and an ear piercing, is unique as he can walk in the sunlight, while most vampires burn. Tassilihoff, Akara Korum Warlock, known to have blue skin, short, black eyes, gray hair and clothing, leather pants, leather top, staff, bare feet. Traits: trickster, sneaky, crafty, fearful, god, and wishful. In Castle Rock, during a stormy night, Raven Wolf finds herself near a crackling fireplace. While preparing to relax for the night, I discovered a captivating section in my book detailing the 10 plagues mentioned in the Bible. The plagues are composed of locusts, flies, frogs, blood and water, hail, cattle disease, wild beasts, black sun, boils, sores, and firstborn sons dying. The term, Book of the Dead, is used to describe a set of ancient Egyptian ritual spells. These items assisted the departed in finding their path to the afterlife and reuniting with the sun god Re and the god of the netherworld Osiris in a perpetual cycle of regeneration and revival. It's a fascinating novel. I couldn't stop reading the Book of the Dead because it was so captivating. While it emerged in the New Kingdom, its roots can be traced back to ancient magical funeral writings. Only the elite Egyptian royalty could access the oldest writings, namely, the pyramid texts. The coffin texts, a changed form of the pyramid texts, were inscribed on coffins and placed in the tombs of non-royals, including wealthy Egyptians and elites, as their views on the afterlife shifted. By the time of the New Kingdom, the afterlife was believed to be accessible to all who could afford the Book of the Dead, a useful handbook containing the spells needed to navigate the treacherous and intricate trials that led to eternal life among the gods. While dozing off, Sandmen's gentle whispers urged me to sleep, but I fought to keep my eyes open, captivated by the enthralling part of the tale. As the fire waned, and a chill permeated the air, I glanced around and noticed my hourglass had mysteriously halted. Just then, the clock tolled, announcing the witching hour. The Book of the Dead was usually written on a papyrus scroll using hieroglyphic or hieratic script, and it was common for it to be illustrated with vignettes showing the deceased and their passage to the afterlife. Considered the most excellent ancient Egyptian specimen, the papyrus of Ani stands out. Ani served as a scribe during the time of ancient Egypt. During an exploration of an empty castle, a dormant force within Ravenwolf yearned to access the abilities of the High Elf Priestess, Blood Hunter, and Druid classes, particularly the power to pause time. Weekend learning activities for addressing anxiety through journaling. The glaringly obvious matter that everyone is avoiding. What is giving you the most trouble at this moment? What is the glaringly obvious topic that nobody wants to talk about? Directly confront it and make a written note. Explain its origins, the effect it has on you, and the actions you would take if possible. Describing fears. I find myself questioning what is causing these sudden emotions to surface. I know I am captivating my emotions all in one. Now I have to find my diary and write my thoughts down. Set aside some time to explore and write about one or two of your deeper fears. Allow yourself thorough exploration and confrontation of your fears. What is the sensation they experience similar to? What is their visual representation? Do they show up at designated times for you? Feelings and emotion. Whenever you feel overwhelmed by emotions, whether it's sadness, nervousness, happiness, or anger, dedicate some time to writing about the specific emotion, its origins, and how it may influence your overall emotional state. Reflect on why you might feel nervous if a family member expressed their wish to come and see you. Allow yourself to relinquish control. Create a list of all the things you cannot change through worry because they are beyond your control. Strength. Recall a couple of moments in your life when you exhibited strength. It's possible that you faced a hard challenge or felt anxious, but you didn't let that stop you, and you achieved your goal. I drafted a letter. When you're anxious about someone, try writing a letter in your journal to express your thoughts and feelings about them. Refrain from sending the letter and decide not to send it prior to writing. By doing this, you can open yourself up to being fully honest with yourself and your journal about the emotions that person evokes in you. List it. Make a list, much like a grocery list of the things that are on your mind, whether they are worries or fears. Journaling about these things can assist you in perceiving them as distinct from your personal being, as fleeting experiences that will ultimately dissipate. It's okay to be unsure. What worries do you have that are characterized by an unknown answer or uncertain outcome? In this moment, a scene emerges where time stands still with the aid of an hourglass and dances in my mind, until the clock abruptly pauses at midnight. Recognize that these are elements of your life whose future outcomes cannot be foreseen. Have confidence in not having all the answers at present, and be assured that you will gain understanding when the right moment arrives. While seated, a whirlwind of emotions engulfs me, but I remain in a daze, witnessing my smoky cloud form alongside the person etched in the sand of time. I am wide awake at this moment, standing in the hourglass as it slowly fills with sand. That being said, what strategies can I use to remain awake? This statement carries a hidden message. Myth is the logical reasoning for this. I can stop time. I was born with supernatural gifts, and it is commonly believed that magical myths and folklore must have some basis in reality. In fact, there are factual records that demonstrate the existence of certain phenomena. British myths, legends, and folk tales have survived in all kinds of different contexts. Some, like the stories of Brutus or Hereward the Wake, are recorded in medieval chronicles that purport to be actual history. Others were written as entertaining tales in ancient manuscripts, and from there were put into book form once the printing press was invented. Still, other stories were not written until the 18th or 19th centuries, when people captured legends and folk tales that were on the verge of dying out. Many of our best sources for traditional stories are in late 18th century books of ballads or in Victorian folktale compilations. Myths and legends began to be recorded just as soon as humans mastered the technology of writing. Often, the very first texts were hymns to the gods or collections of mythological stories that became arranged into cycles, explaining how the world was created, how humans came into existence, or why death is necessary. Such stories are recorded in the Bible, the Fall, Noah's flood, for example, and in Greek myth. Hero tales are also among the most ancient of story types. Basically, my words indicate that regardless of its authenticity or fabrication, sharing folklore with loved ones in the universe is the initial step. The script discusses the divided opinions of experts on the development and spread of stories, while emphasizing the important roles of myths and legends in our culture. The Boy Who Cried Wolf is a prime example of how short tales are essential for communicating vital information or life lessons in a memorable manner. Generation after generation, important lore is transmitted in a brief and easy-to-understand way. They elucidate the dangers of allowing small children near hazardous bodies of water or going solo into the mountains. When groups possess the ability to pass on such narratives, it enhances the opportunities for those who hear them, and these individuals pass the stories on to their own children. Just as I was getting ready to clean up and detach myself from the urban fantasy world, along came Hayes, a vampire. I'm grateful that he's such an amazing friend of mine, taking care of the fireplace and offering him a cup of coffee or something else. Sitting at the table, I responded with a hesitant sure, and couldn't help but ask about the reason for the late-night visit. Well, it's not like he has late nights, regardless. Lost in conversation, we failed to notice how time stood still. With his vampire capabilities, the timing was just right. The clock currently shows a bit after 3 a.m., and now we're back to chatting. Hayes conveyed to Raven Wolf that there is something additional taking place, and the atmosphere is brimming with magic. I needed to replenish the wood in the fireplace, and offered my coffee to Hayes. "No, I'm good, thanks." He told me to depart and instructed you to rest. There was something different with his demeanor this time. Something was nagging him, and finally, he spit it out. Raven Wolf is at the center of the message that brought Hades here, along with a warlock who needs their help. The impossible has become possible in the realm of fantasy. While Hades vanished, he still remained in the shadows, by my side, whispering that it's time for me to rest. Morning has arrived. Remember to attend to your everyday hygiene chores and then head downstairs to add wood to the fireplace and provide warmth for this aging castle. The door was knocked on. True to form, it was none other than Tasselhoff, Karakorum Warlock. Raven Wolf expresses a wish to comprehend Tasselhoff, Karakorum Warlock, psychosis and trauma, proposing twice-weekly appointments. Tasselhoff Karakorum Warlock goes to schedule his next appointment with the nurse, but discovers she's not there. While back at the Raven Wolf office, Tasselhoff Karakorum Warlock is intrigued by a mysterious noise coming from the closet. While Tasselhoff Karakorum Warlock trembles in fear, the closet door ominously opens, and the boogeyman emerges, still gripping its Raven Wolf human skin mask. The monster that haunts your nightmares turned out to be right in front of you all along. That's incredibly scary. Out of nowhere, the boogeyman manifested, presenting fleeting moments from my life and disturbing depictions of boogeyman truths. Tasselhoff, Karakorum Warlock, since you're at my door, do you intend to ask me to come in? In the process of offering the beverage, he realized that something was clearly troubling him, causing him to shake as he spoke. While talking, he recounted his continuous dreams of being hunted by the boogeyman in an office environment. He remained clutching the Raven Wolf mask crafted from human skin. As we conversed, Raven Wolf's exceptional abilities started to activate. While she was listening, her eyes rolled back, and she started seeing visions transforming into pictures. Taking Tasselhoff, Karakorum Warlock, to the office for an appointment, she is startled when the boogeyman shows up, having just seen Raven Wolf there. In this state, not only am I seeing visions, it is changing to another time and space. Raven Wolf found themselves utterly bewildered, as they were powerless to stop what was happening. When this happens, she has to go with the flow, and it takes time. Taslahoff, Karakorum Warlock, must also wait for the return of Raven Wolf. While she walks, multiple portals materialize as she seeks to uncover the dream or nightmare that Taslahoff, Karakorum Warlock, is going to hold. Raven Wolf is comprehending and synthesizing everything. Within my dream realm, I have the company of 2 old friends and a multitude of books about the dead, Egypt, mythological symbols, and folklores. It's my turn to be the focus, not my friends. Here's the catch, though. The story is, in fact, an alternate version of history. Exploring hypothetical scenarios, alternative history in science fiction speculates on how the world could have changed if historical events had a different outcome. Once or twice, I have managed to freeze time. And now, in this particular instance, Raven Wolf is doing it again while Hades explores the realm of dream consciousness. In this creepy scenario, the boogeyman locked eyes with me, signaling his imminent intention to take my life. I owe my life to Hades. Sitting at my dining room table, the 3 of us have just come back from a state of premonition. Whenever Raven Wolf comes back, Hades is familiar with the routine. In her dream journal, she consistently writes and includes drawings for visual elements. Once finished, she began to ask a series of questions. We are now in a state of deep slumber. We're in a peculiar situation going head-to-head with the boogeyman. Can you elaborate on the topic? 2 motives emerged in Raven Wolf's reality: the existence of another world and the chance to demonstrate her abilities. I've decided that it's the right time for me to alter my life's course.